summers don't necessarily support the same kind of production we used to get in the past when our nights were a little bit cooler. I'm specifically talking about tomatoes. So when we come together as a community and save those those fruits that are producing in this heat, then we can save it select those ones that are doing well, and year after year after year, um, have a locally adapted variety, which is one of the aims of the Seed Landing Library. Um, it's also an act of protest. And I know everything's so political that I really don't want to go too much into this, but we kind of know that Monsanto, now Bayer, has been committing acts of biopiracy, where they steal the knowledge of and genetic resources of indigenous communities and then prevent them from being able to use their own seeds and then take the financial gain and patent them from those. So, and um, this is a way to just to wipe out traditional seed saving knowledge, cultural traditions, and more importantly, their own um, food supply. And this is happening all over the world, and even in Iraq. Um, there was a law where that gave Monsanto the right to take control of those cultural resources and patent them, and it's just is ugly. If you want to read more, The Seed Underground, A Growing Revolution to Save Food is one, and anything that Vandana Shiva, right? So um, go look that up. Also, because of catastrophe and the multinational corporations taking over this world food supply. So these are pretty outdated, and you're not going to be able to see it, but it's just a quick representation of how the seed supply works. So these are the major companies as of in 2007. So again, outdated. Um, all these companies owns 67% of the world's seed supply. Now, this is Monsanto, but then Bayer bought them out. And then this down here, Syngenta, was purchased by a company in China. And so it just keeps getting smaller and smaller. And then they also own pharmaceutical and chemical companies. And they're kind of taking over our seed supply. And not only that, they are choosing to reduce the varieties that are available. This, again, sorry you can't see this. It is just a quick tree of, in 1903, this was a representation of all the different varieties of the crops that were available. And then as of about 8 years ago, this is a small representation of the varieties. So for instance, peas, and now this is a small representation. So they're also reducing the amount of varieties that are out there, and variety is very important for genetic diversity, so that as we have changes, catastrophes, there's more of a genetic diversity to be able to pull from to grow out. So so there's a little bit of my politics, sorry, but it's really a big and kind of invisible thing. So now you're fired up to save seeds. The next step is deciding what level of purity you want. So if you are going to be saving seed as a business, or you are trying to maintain the genetic integrity of an heirloom, or to bring it back to existence, then you will need to exercise greater lengths of purity. And we're not going to go into that because then that starts to get kind of geeky, and I just want us to start easy. So so we know a seed, any seed that you plant, if it's still fresh and viable, is going to grow a plant. Now, you save a seed from, say, a Chanterelle melon, you are going to get a melon, but not necessarily Charente. Now, the reason for that is because that family is pollinated from insects, and those insects can go a mile, 3 miles around. And even if you are growing just a Charente in your garden, your neighbor might um, might be growing a different kind of melon. And all melons, except for watermelons, are the same species, so they can all cross. Um, so, but but maybe that's all you want. Maybe you just want a melon, and so save those seeds and grow them out. But if you're saving it for others, then take the next step, at least in labeling. Label that this wasn't, say, seeds taken from Charente melon, not isolated, and then people can make their own decisions. Unfortunately, you won't be able to find out what qualities that melon has until a whole nother year. So a lot of people don't have the time or space to do that kind of experimentation. Um, but it's fun. So another example would be seeds from a zucchini will grow into a squash, but that species, there's a lot of different kinds of squash that are in that species, and they too all cross within a mile, 3 miles distance, however far the bees go. So the next generation could be some combination of a zucchini or a pumpkin or an acorn squash or anything in the cucurbit pepo species. And so again, it could be fun. It's easy. It's going to grow a plant. It's going to grow food, but it's may not be all the qualities that you're hoping for. And so some of the things that are really good to know as a basis for beginning seed saving is learning the families and the species of things. The families kind of tell you in general what kind of pollinators, what kind of flowers they are, and then the species will tell you what it will cross with. So, so in this case, the family, all the cucurbits, it's good to know that all the cucurbits have a male flower. This is from a spaghetti squash, but this can be for cucumbers, melons, summer squash, or winter squash. This is the male. It's got just the stem and the flower, and then in there's the pollen. The female flower tends to have a shorter stem, and it's got the little ovary of the future plant, so that when it gets pollinated, this will activate this to grow, and then a little flower. It even has a very different stem. This is the squared off ribbed stem, whereas this is just a smooth stem. So with species, it's good to know what species they are. It's like I had mentioned with the zucchinis, there's a lot in that same species that will cross, wherein a butternut is another kind of winter squash that's in a different species, and then they won't cross. So that's some good basic information to know. Another example is with the brassicas, the mustard family. All the plants with the four-petaled, usually yellow flowers. There's a lot in that family that are the same species, namely Brassica oleracea, which includes broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, collards. Did I say cauliflower? Anyways, there's a lot of those plants, and they will cross. So that's why it's good to know species and family of the plant. It's also good to know what seed type. So the best seeds to the most reliable seeds to save are going to be those of open pollinated or heirlooms. Heirlooms are a subset of open pollinated, meaning that they are open pollinated, but they've been around for 50 years and usually have some kind of family history or some kind of tradition behind it. Open pollinated are ones that given the right conditions are going to um, produce the next generation will be just like its parents. Whereas hybrids, um, to maybe unlikely parents or very specific secret parents, have um, been used to cross. Um, and that second generation is not reliably the same as its parent. It can be any number of traits. So, for instance, sun gold tomatoes are a hybrid that a lot of people love. They're the little orange cherry tomatoes that are super sweet. Um, I've heard firsthand accounts of letting those go to seed, and and some large amount of them came out red, some of them orange, most of them tomatoish flavor, some a little bit bitter, and only a few sweet. So with the hybrids, you can um, you'll get food, you'll get a tomato, but it may not have the qualities you're looking for. And sometimes they'll be good, sometimes they won't be good, but it's food. And then also genetically modified, so or GE plants. These are ones that have been created in the lab, and the characteristics are introduced into the DNA by unnatural genetic engineering techniques. So these are ones that you obviously won't be able to, they will not come true to seed. Um, so the other thing you want to know is just know what kind of traits you're looking for. Is it the sweetness you're going for? Is it earliness? So when you're picking from your field which ones to save, um, um, just know what you're looking for. Now, you got want to be picky about this, because just because something went to seed doesn't mean it's a good candidate. So I've seen some people who might have a lettuce that goes to seed first in a field of other lettuces just because it was a waste. So why not just save the seed? But you're going to be saving those genetic traits. And I think most of us would rather have those lettuces that provided lots of food, and so those would be the better ones to save seed from, and not the and not just the ones that went to seed first. Sometimes it could be, I know with corn, you can save all of like if you have a colorful corn, you can save all of them and then most likely get some colorful corn the next year. But then some people might select just those ones that have a certain color or pick them out of the mix. You can also, like with corn, some will just have one ear and others will have multiple ears. So would be the traits that some people might want to preserve. So just know that by preserving those seeds of that plant, you could be carrying on some particular characteristics of that plant, whether they're good or bad. So just know what you're looking for. So now maybe a few definitions. Um, so there's a question wondering what it means for a seed to be locally adapted. Okay, great. Good timing. I will. So, for instance, a lot of seed companies are growing in areas that aren't local. So maybe like they're growing them in Maine or Washington, for instance, and saving those seeds. Now, those seeds, they chose them, they selected those plants in that climate for producing great fruit, right? Great tomatoes. Now, you transfer those traits to um, to growing here in our hot climate. They're not necessarily going to be adapted to this climate. So let's say we grew out a field of those plants that we got the seeds that came from a different kind of climate. Um, we had 3 plants that were producing wildly, and the other plants weren't producing. Now we select the seeds from that tomato plant, or those 3 tomato plants, whatever, that are doing well, and then grow them out the next year. And then the next year, we might choose those plants that are doing the best under our conditions for that year, and then same over and over and over till until we have a local seed that's adapted. Um, Also, a really good reason why to get seeds from a local seed company, such as Redwood Seed Company, that grow their own seeds out. Um, a quick side note, the way general seed industry goes, most seed is grown by big farms, and then a seed company will buy a lot of it and then package it under their name. That every year they have that lot uh, tested for germination, and if it passes the basic USDA standards, they can package it and sell it for that year. So when they say it expires, it's because it's already been packaged under that year, but that same lot could be tested and sold another year. Now, there are, it's rare, but there are some good ones like Redwood Seed Company. There's a bunch up in the Northeast and in the Southwest that might be good for us that actually grow the seed out on their farm. So choosing ones that have a local or a similar climate is a way to also um, get some seeds that might be better adapted. So I hope that um, answers that question. Um, so on to a few definitions, and I feel like I'm talking really fast. I'll try to slow down. So pollination is literally the transfer of pollen from one plant or the male part to the female plant. Sometimes that could be on the same flower, like in tomatoes, and sometimes like in the cucurbits, the squashes, they're on 2 plants. I mean, on the same plant, but 2 different flowers. Sometimes they could be on 2 different trees, 2 different plants. But yeah, so pollination is a way for us to get seeds. Population size is something I will be mentioning, and that's the amount of plants needed to maintain purity. Again, this is going to be your decision, what level of purity you're going for. So one plant is going to contain all the genetics gene pool of that one plant. But if you save it from 2 plants, 5 plants, 100 plants, all that genetic diversity can be maintained, swirled around. Some plants, they can suffer from inbreeding, like humans and cousins, and with that inbreeding depression, they call it, the genetics become weaker, the plants become weaker, and you can die out a population. So if you are looking to save plants over multiple generations, then you might consider having a larger population size. So there's also sulfurs versus crossers, and don't want to go too far into it, but sulfurs are basically the kind of flowers that can self-pollinate. So this is going to include all the plants that we list in Chico Seed Lending Library as the beginner seeds. And that's because getting the genetic purity is a lot easier. So in the case of beans and lettuce and and a lot of the tomatoes, they self-pollinate before they even open. So um, so even though some insects and there's some other weather conditions and stuff that can make them more susceptible to cross pollination, it's a pretty good bet that those ones won't need a lot of work to maintain purity. Um, and because they're also adapted to this inbreeding, all this self-pollination, you don't need as many, you don't, the population size to maintain the genetic purity is reduced. But then the crossers are the others. Like these are the harder ones to maintain purity, or, and when I say purity, those traits that you're looking for. And so so when they um, so those ones can easily cross pollinate, and you can get a wider range of um, of traits, and that would include things like the brassicas, which includes broccoli and cabbage and all those, like I mentioned, the cucurbits, which is all your cucumbers, melons, um, squashes, and then also corn is another one. So another definition or another thing to think about is distance and or isolation. And physical distance is one of those. So if you are trying to, um, especially if you're growing some of those crossers and want to maintain some of those traits, then you want to think about isolation, and that could be through distance. So some of the sulfurs, maybe just 10 feet or less is sufficient. And then for some of the crossers, 3 feet is more of a requirement. Um, you can also isolate by using cages or bagging. You can also do this through timing. For me, I like to grow some. I like to grow corn, but I can't just grow one stand of a whole bunch of corn. So I do two different corns that have different timing. So one is like 95 days to harvest, and the other one is 115 days. And that way I plant them at the same time, and they're both going to bloom at this different time, so they never have a chance through timing to cross. Um, and getting to bagging and caging, that's a little bit more advanced, so I recommend looking those up if you're interested. Some other little tricks that aren't surefire ways, but for some of us gardeners, um, it's worth trying out, um, would be um, having kind of a pollinator trap. I love using basils and letting them go to flower because the bees love them. So they're going to be more interested in um, hanging out with the basils than they are with some of the other less desirable um, plants like the tomatoes and peppers. You can also, if you grow a large block of something, let's say, what I have, my example here today that I'm doing is this pepper. So I have a large block of the golden Marconi sweet peppers, and I'm saving seeds from the inside, even though I don't have the recommended distance from one plant to another or one variety to another. I have a good block, and I chose to take the seeds from the inside, and that just means that most likely the bee went from the plants of the same variety, um, bringing the pollen from those plants. So that's one way. Sometimes they say just like tall barriers, like walls of sunflowers or corn, amaranth trees, or mechanical barriers like fences can help deter some of the bees from coming around. Um, so the last little definition I want to mention is roguing. So that is something that's really more on the advanced side, but it's a word just to know if you, even on a smaller scale, it's good to know. So roguing is pulling out plants with undesirable traits so that it doesn't enter the pollination gene pool. So maybe there's a plant that is just really weak looking. Maybe it turned out to be a different color than you were looking. But anyways, you would actually want to pull that one out so it doesn't affect the other plants around it. So now for some hands-on stuff. We're going to talk about some of the beginner seeds and then talk about some ways of processing. I first want to start with this bean. This is a dry process because we want the seed to be dried. This is actually from a couple years ago. I've been storing it in a pillowcase because that's one of the ways that you can break it up. You could just step on it and take a rolling pin to break all the pods out. You can sit and watch a movie and do this yourself too, or I love having kids take a part in this because, well, sometimes they can only do it for so long. But so these are the beans inside. These are the seeds. These can be either cooked as dry beans, or you can save them for planting out. If I were to crush all these up, like in a bag, and I wasn't going to individually do it, I might choose to sift them out. I have these seed sifters of different sizes, and it doesn't look like I brought one that's big enough for beans, but you would want the hole bigger than you would want the seed to be able to go through the hole. This one's bigger, but not quite big enough for these seeds. But if it were the case, you would sift them out over into a bowl, or I like these flat boxes a lot for things. And hopefully if you have the right size, then the beans would come through, and most of the chaff would be left on top. And then you could go further. And again, if you're seed saving, you don't have to remove all the chaff. It can invite some moisture if you leave it in there. But if you were, you could take a couple of bowls, or I like these baskets. This one's got little holes, so I can also use it as a sifter. And then this one is tighter weave. And the way to winnow would be, it could be going from basket to basket with a fan or on a windy day. And then, probably can't see that, but then more of the chaff gets blown away. You could also take kind of a shallow plate and just blow it. And I think more professional ways to do it would have a box fan, a tub, and then another tub so that the heavy seed drops in the first tub and then the lighter flows in the wind. Um, but it isn't, that isn't necessary. So these ones are really cool to me. They are called German pole beans. As far as I can tell, I call them a Chico heirloom. They can be eaten like black beans, but they also make these really strong pole beans that just go on for days. And the green beans are delicious too. They were given to me originally by three different people, all saying that it's been passed around this town for a long time. And as far as I could tell, the origin um, is Richard Roth, and because everybody mentioned that they got them from him. But that's it. That is the German pole bean. Now, one strategy, like the beans, you can grow lots of different beans near each other. There could be some cross pollination, like I said before, because maybe on a really hot day, the order of the flowers opening and pollination got a little bit funky, or sometimes bees will be a little bit more forceful in getting to the nectar by sometimes eating into the flower to get the nectar, or just kind of forcing their way in. But um, most of these are Phaseolus vulgaris, but then there are plenty of beans that um, are different species. So you can have one of the regular garden bean type, but also have one of these kind. These are pretzel beans and black-eyed peas, but they're both cowpea types. They are, let's see if this is worth even trying to show up here. But these are some of the different kind of beans. You can grow a variety of each, and that will ensure that they won't cross with each other. The runner beans are a different species, the tepary beans, the cow beans, the yard-long beans, and then the regular common beans. I have all this in a file that I'll be sending to Pam that will be on the Butte County Local Food Network website. But that's the family Fabaceae. And so something to note, another thing people ask is how to know when to harvest the seed for ripening. Obviously, these are plants that didn't make it in the field, but as the early folks heard, it can make for a good demo though. These are really cool. These are pretzel beans. They normally would also just take over a cornfield. And this species of beans, the beans stick out just like this California buckeye. And so it makes it easy for picking, either for green or for Shelly's, taking the green, still green seeds and cooking those up, or for dry beans. These are an example of perfect timing for those. They haven't opened themselves and they're already dry. So that's perfect time for those. You can even hear them shattering inside. For this one, you can see this one is still green. You can see the silhouette of each of the beans in there. So it's on its way. It's probably at the Shelly stage right now. But I wouldn't harvest them yet for saving for seed. These ones are dry. They're perfect. They have a little bit of flexibility to them, a little bit, but they are still good to go. This one, also green, is not ready yet. So An example of how to store these would be in an envelope. I like to write the name of the variety and the year. If it's something that could cross easily, like the squash, then I would like to say, especially if I'm sharing with folks, I would say not isolated. Um, if you don't know what it is, then I would describe it. Say, like, what are the traits that you're looking for? Bean that I got from blah 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 down the street. Um, Curly dry beans, vigorous growth, something like that. Let's see. So let's go on to the Asteraceae family. So that includes lettuce and sunflowers, zinnias, marigolds, and they too are they're sulfurs. Mostly are going to not cross, but man, those bees love these sunflowers so much, so it's pretty easy. So here's a few different stages. This one is obviously, or this is obviously dry, and the birds have even started to peck at it. This one is still green, and so but the seeds are dry enough to be able to separate and to harvest them. If you were to harvest them at this stage, you would want to absolutely make sure that either you harvest them or remove the seeds from, actually this might even be a little too early to take the seeds off, but you could, or let it air dry. This like the corn, the cob of a corn, attracts so much moisture that if you were to try to save this, set this aside without good airflow or without some heat to dry it out, it is likely to mold. I made the mistake one year of having a whole bunch of corn cobs that I thought of that beautiful glass gem variety. And I thought I had everything totally dry, but I didn't have the time yet to separate the kernels, and I put them in a big jar and it all molded. So I will never do that again, right? But yes, this is more of the perfect stage, but before the birds get them all. And in this case, I would just use my hand to release them. In this case too, let's see, there's some petals on here, and you could just kind of hand remove them, or you could do the winnowing if you want to be a little bit more precise. If you're just going to be planting these out, having a little chaff in it's no big deal. If it's not all the way dry, then it will be a big deal. If you're eating it, then you might want to do a little bit more winnowing. And this would be considered like an oil seed type. It is great for birds. You can do great sprouts from them for eating. This one, I don't know what kind it was, but it was a beautiful multi-branched tall one. So I would make all those kind of notes for my seed saving. And then so you could do the same with zinnias and marigolds. There could be some crossing, but it is a pretty safe bet. Also cosmos. Let's see, lettuce. Lettuce is another one in the aster family. These are little puffs, just like a dandelion. And with the lettuce, each one of these flowers usually blooms and ripens at different times. So you have to choose when is the best time. Usually I start to see maybe half of the puff and maybe 3/4 of the flowers are puffed up like this, but I lucked out. This one is a romaine called Plateau, and I like to store these in bags upside down and let them mature all the way. I could easily just shake them about, or naturally after some time they would drop out. Now the puff part is not the seed. So if you're trying to shape this out to shake out the chaff, you're going to be looking for, let's see, I don't know if I'm doing it, the little black seeds. That's what you're going for. So that is lettuce, and again, that's an easy beginners. But don't just choose the one that bolts first. Go for the one that has long producing life. Let's see what was. So for beans, ideally it would be 10 to 20 feet apart, and population minimums, one for just viable seeds, 5 to 10 plants for variety maintenance, 20 more for genetic preservation if you're doing it for a business. With the lettuce, it would be also 10 to 20 feet would be ideal. One plant is sufficient to have viable seeds, 5 to 10 for variety maintenance. So again, that's going to be if you're going to try to maintain that variety over many years as opposed to just 1 year. And then 20 or more plants for the genetic preservation. So next is going to be the tomato. Now tomato is one of those plants that is considered a wet process. It is going to get a little messy and it's kind of stinky. So excuse me as I make a little room here. So wet processing, basically any of the fruits where the seed is combined, you can kind of consider that wet processing, because they're never going to be dry. So, you know, zucchini is going to be a wet process, but it's really tomatoes and cucumbers that really need that extra step that's fermenting. So this is not sweet smelling. These are seeds that have been fermenting for 3 days now, and that's about 2 to 4 days is usually pretty good. So what I would do is I would take a tomato and try to squeeze into some water, or you can add the water later. Squeeze the pulp with some seeds in it. This one here was one that I got from Grub Farm, and I don't know, it was a striped red one. I just had it at the time when I needed to do this, but I don't know what variety it is. So if I were to write a tag for it or on the envelope, I would say large striped red tomato, delicious, from Grub. So with some water and the seeds and whatever pulp comes out, you would let it sit for 2 to 4 days. This one is the Jean Flamme, which has been really good to growers in Chico. It's just, you know, it's only golf ball, ping pong ball size, and it's orange, so it has it's a little bit sweet, tropical. It makes a really great dried tomato, as well as a fresh or salad tomato. That size they call saladette. but I've heard from people year after year and my own experiences, no matter what kind of hot summers we have, um, it always produces. So one question I see is, if my letter was bitter, will the seed produce bitter plants? So um, it, okay, I'm going to go, I see there's a couple questions, so I'm going to finish this and then I'll come back to those two questions. Thanks. Um, so this, so there I go. See, that's why I shouldn't do that. So this is a Jean Flamme, one of those funny ones that people started writing Juan Flamme. And so you'll see that on a lot of seed catalogs, but Jean Flamme it's French and that's what it's been for a long time. But lately people have been copying other people. Anyway, so Jean Flamme, 820. Um, is the month and year, and I'll be able to transfer that on. If I'm doing a whole bunch of different tomato seeds, I'd want to make sure that that I label everything because I'll forget it. So the next step is to pour off the top scummy part. You might see that some seeds will go, but it is likely that those seeds weren't viable and not fully developed. And then now when you get down to the end, you might add some more water, swish it around. There's just a few seeds in here. And the most common way that people might then save them is on or then the most common next step is to take these onto a paper towel. It's good to have it named. I put large striped red from Grub. And then you let it dry out. Sometimes I'm lazy or smart, I don't know. I just put it directly into an envelope, kind of a big one, reused one like this, and then it dries up in there, and then it's already packaged, because something like this could easily get stacked upon, or once it dries out, the fans might blow it, or that has happened to me too many times that I tend towards just putting it in an envelope and making sure that it gets good airflow so it dries out. So that's the fermenting. Now, what that does and why it's important is because there's a little gel sac on those and cucumbers. So you would do this with cucumbers as well. And it's holds in moisture. So that is fine if you're going to directly seed them. But if you're going to store them, you want them to be dry. And that kind of prevents it. Also, that sac can hold in powdering or damping off fungus and some other fungi. So it's also for disease resistance or disease prevention that you would do that extra step. There's still a good chance if you didn't do that it would be just fine, but that is recommended. Okay, now from my mix. So others, that's the Solanaceae family. The other ones that are in that family are wet processed, but they don't have to be fermented. This here is a golden Marconi. As I mentioned, I have a bunch of peppers near each other. I have the sweet peppers separated, at least 100 feet from the hot peppers. I also have a whole bunch of basil planted in between so that they won't go back and forth. And that's because peppers are one of those more rare um, species that has what's called a xenia with the X effect, where the pollen transfer from one plant to another can affect the heat. So if you are growing a jalapeno next to a bell pepper, um, and you have a very active bee population, then it is likely that they could transfer the hot pollen to um, the sweet pepper, and then you'll get a bunch of um, hot peppers that year. saving the not just in saving seeds in the next generation, but even in that harvest this year. So again, your distance and distracting the bees are some of the best options. They're considered self-pollinating, but I think they're discovering more and more that that was more in monoculture situations. A lot of us have the polycultures where we have lots of different things growing, and therefore bees are more present. They aren't one of their favorite nectar sources. Um, so they would so if you had monoculture, they wouldn't really be around, but with the polyculture, they're going to be around. So with these ones, I took these from the middle of my stand. So I have about, I don't know, 10 foot by 3 foot row of them. And I, I harvested the seeds from the middle. You want to make sure that they're really ripe. As you might know, all peppers pretty much have different stages of color. Like green bell peppers are just immature, and they would, if left on the plant, would turn maybe red or purple or yellow or orange. And that's the ripe stage. So you want to make sure that it is in the ripe stage and not before. Um, and this here is, there's a couple of white viable ones, but the rest of these, maybe that was immature or didn't get great pollination, but I would not save those black ones. Whereas this one is one of the ribs, and it's full of nice kind of dense seeds. So this was a really good one to take to save the seeds from. And so I did write on this one, golden Marconi separated from hots, but not from other sweets, but from center of large stand. So I know for myself, and again, if I'm sharing with others, and maybe I have a customer or a friend who said that golden Marconis were their mom's favorite, and they really wanted a golden Marconi, or just really had really specific hopes for golden Marconi. I would definitely feel bad if that didn't turn out to be a golden Marconi. Last one in this family, and then I'll go to some questions. So eggplant. This one really rotted in waiting for this, so it's really stinky. And so this would be the ideal stage for harvesting the eggplant. This is really ripe, and this would be beyond bitter for somebody to eat, but this is a more ripe eggplant. You could still get some viable seeds out of a purple one, but make sure that it is, beyond ripe. And with these, a lot of folks will, the more serious ones might put it in, more serious seed savers might put it in a blender and then wash it out. If you're only, and that's if you're trying to get maximum amount of seeds. If you're just trying to get enough seeds for yourself and a few people, you can just go into each of the cavities and scrape them out. Because there's some goo in there, um, I would also wash it in some water before and dry it out before saving it. But that's eggplant. So to some questions. So the one that I first read was, if my lettuce is bitter, will the seed produce bitter plants? Um, Possibly. Um, it could be that lettuce goes bitter if it's allowed to go dry. Also, when it's at the seeding stage, it will be bitter. So lettuce, um, the ideal harvest time for lettuce is going to be within the first couple months, and then after that 2 months, that's usually when it will go to seed, and it's definitely bitter when it starts to elongate or to bolt. Sometimes when there isn't enough water or nutrition, that could be bitter. So there's a few environmental factors, but yes, I would consider it a possibility that it would have some would carry some bitter characteristics too. But again, that could be environmental or it could be um, in its genes. Um, so also, I have being of unknown species, like from the seed swap. How can I tell what species they are? Ooh, a good question. Um, I think the best way is to be able to grow them out because they're going to have different habits and they're gonna have different growth habits. Um, I am not. If you just got regular beans, I don't. There isn't a definite call, but this species here, the vineyas, the buckeyes, and the cowpeas and stuff, they do have. If you've looked at the black-eyed peas, they have a slightly different um, shape to them than the regular beans. So, like most of the fun ones that you see are going to be the regular garden variety, the phaseolus. If they're really big, they're going to be a lima or one of the runner beans. This one, a lot of the zinnias are going to be a little bit smaller, and this one isn't really showing it, but they could be kind of compact um, and even squishing each other, like on Crowder beans, where they could be squished up. But um, I would say that by looking at the seeds and seeing if they're these smaller ones with a pretty big belly button, um, there's a good chance it's the Vinia, and that if they're a little bit they're bigger than probably the garden, but the only way you can tell which species is going to be from growing it out. Um, Sorry, I don't have a good better answer for that. So next, some of the intermediate. I don't have any samples to show you, but like amaranth, Amaranthe ACE family, which includes spinach and chard, and beets, are considered more of an intermediate because they are wind pollinated. And so so it's hard to ice those other distancing methods I mentioned. It's a little bit harder to do because the wind can go anywhere. You can't cage them or bag them. Um, um, but one thing to know, let's see, is that there aren't a lot of people who are growing beets for seed. So a lot of people feel pretty secure saving their chard seed. Um, um, so, because beets and chard are the same species, and one is grown for its roots and the other for its leaves. And if you were to save, because they're biennials, or beets are biennials in particular, they aren't going to go to seed till their second year. So not a lot of people are going to be growing them out for their seed. A lot of the bulb crops are considered intermediate because they also take a long time because they don't produce seed till their second year. So that's a big time commitment in your yard. Um, Professionally, they're harvested in the winter time, and um, they're they're rogued out once harvested, and only the good ones with the qualities that they're looking for are then replanted come spring. Then it goes to flower, and then they save those seeds. So again, just because one onion out of a bunch goes to seed, it's not really worth saving the seeds for those because they're going to probably just carry those genes that made them bolt early. Another one are carrots. Carrots, another intermediate one. They are insect pollinated. Typically, they say 800 feet to half a mile is the amount of distance required um, from a neighbor or in your field. It also can cross pollinate with Queen Anne's lace, which is an ornamental around here but can grow wild in um, some locations. Um, and like I said, with a lot of the root crops, they're kind of rogued out once they're harvested. Um, with carrots, as some people have tried to grow a carrot top, um, they could be tasted before replanted. So if you take the bottom off, beets, you can slice off the cheeks, the sides, to see how they taste if you're trying to rogue them out for taste. So the same thing with onions, as I mentioned. Now on to some of the more advanced ones. So these are ones that, again, a melon's going to give you a melon, but what what qualities are you really hoping for? Um, oh, so we'll start with the cucurbits. Now the thing to know about them is that there's a lot of variety within the same species. So in the cucurbita pepo, which is the zucchinis, there's also pumpkins and acorn squash, delicata squash, and those can all cross within, as far as a bee fly, so a mile or so. Um, so it's harder, I'd say. Most of us have a neighbor who's going to be growing something in that family. And if you were to save seeds, then that would, the next generation can take on any qualities that any neighboring plants have. But if you are going to do it, because heck, it's food, why not? A zucchini, a ripe zucchini, we eat zucchinis as immature, and that's why they're called summer, because they only are around for a little while. You want them to at least be showing some yellow, so they should be big, they should yellow or orange. But this is a zucchini, and its seed cavity has been a little bit more swollen. So let's see what happens here. So this zucchini even starts to look like a winter squash. These are perfect. So this is wet processing. You don't have to ferment them, but you ought to wash them off if you want to. And this has a definite cavity. So zucchinis, wait till they're really old. Same with cucumber. So cucumber, it's really light and hollow, and these you might be able to see how it's got that little jelly sack around it. That's something that you want to ferment off, just like we did with the tomatoes. Um, and yeah, and then the rest of those are self-explanatory. The thing is, like, know that like uh, cantaloupes, muskmelons, or basically any of the melons are the same species as each other, so they're going to cross. Watermelon is a different species, so that's only going to cross with other watermelons within the neighborhood. Um, Corn is another one that is in the advanced realm because there are so many different variables that can go into it. This one is the Guatemalan green. Oh man, green Guatemalan dent corn. It's from Redwood Seed Company, and it's this beautiful green. I had mentioned how I um, I did another crop of another kind of corn. I planted them at the same time, but the other one is only just flowering, and this one is ready for harvest. I could leave these the um, on the plants longer. They have not dried out all the way. The husk is dry, the silks were dry, the corn, as long as I give it some airflow, that can continue to dry out. I harvested it a little bit earlier than I normally would, partly because I wanted to show you. Also because I hear that raccoons at the farm decimate most corn crops, so I wanted to get it before they do. Now, the thing with corn is that they're wind pollinated, so this means that it can go 3 miles. So it's really important to have distance if you want to maintain the purity. It's the other plant, like the peppers, that have the zinnia with an X effect. And so if you're growing popcorn and sweet corn and they're blooming at the same time, that that will make your sweet corn starchy and not so sweet in that first year as well as the next year. It is also really important to have a larger population size. I think 100 is the minimum for multiple year seed save on them. And this, I just want to point out, this is an example of a poorly pollinated one. Each silk is its own flower, and that flower goes to each kernel. So that just shows you how many silks didn't get pollinated. That is in an area where I had poor germination. So instead of being a block where the pollen is blowing around to each other, it was just, a couple in a line. So, and at the end of the row, so it didn't get pollinated. Now with corn, this is another fun one. Sometimes with kids, I would get a group of kids and we'd turn buckets upside down, and then on a tarp, we would just take it and flip the corn off, and then gather it. This is a dry corn, so it could be ground into a cornmeal or corn flour. Another thing you can do is I have these little shellers, and they've got a larger side for flour corn and one for popcorn, which is smaller. And still a little too dry for this to really work, but you just twist it, and normally then the seeds come off. But so kind of winding down here, brassicas, that's another one. They're all in capsules, and they should be dried out or at least yellow before harvesting them. And I just, depending on how much you have, I just kind of break them up with my hands, or again, you can put them in a bag or a pillowcase and stomp on them. And then I would do the winnowing technique. Most of the brassica seeds are little balls, little black or brown balls. Um, Basil is most of this in the mint family. They can really cross. They can even go cross in the genus. These ones, it's really good to know what species of basils you have, because a lot of the different flavored ones are all the same, so they can cross. There is a lime, which is a different, and the tulsi, which is a different species. But this, again, this is just a dry process, um, and you'll see that they would come out like little tick sizes. So just in last couple fun ones, how to know when to harvest. So this is okra, and the seeds, like since I've harvested it this yesterday, these little plates are becoming more and more open, and soon I'll put this in a bag, but soon those will just pop out. And okra's another easy one to do. Sesame. This happened so fast. I kept my eye on it, like trying to figure out when I should harvest them to show you all. And then over the weekend, they all started to open. And so this is at the stage. So inside here, let's see. Are the sesame seeds. And I think it's a pretty fun crop. It's easy to get. Oh, they all came off of my hand. You can get a two-way. You can get a pretty good crop or a large amount of harvest from them. They're beautiful flowers, and they're drought tolerant and heat tolerant and kind of fun to grow. I harvested, like I said, I harvested those too late because they already started to open. But typically I would choose a stalk that has maybe the bottom one starting to brown up. And then I would put them in bags, pillowcases, whatever, and then let them pop themselves open and harvest from the bottom of the bag. So the last thing I want to mention is then perennials. So a lot of the perennials, different herbs, like this one, I've got hyssop, I've got feverfew. There isn't always a whole lot for them to cross within their species, so they're pretty good ones to do some seed harvesting. In this case, I've already taken them off. I stripped them off the flower stalks. This hyssop is a good tea medicinal herb that's in the mint family with pretty flowers. I would take, because I don't care if I don't get every one of them, I'm going to take this chaff and just hand remove it. The seeds are at the bottom. Ooh, what a mess. And then you could take, I've got these fancy screens, but I could also just take my little tea strainer and separate. You can see there's a pretty good separation there. And then for the last bit, again, I could just blow that off. And with perennials, I really like, if you're doing this for yourself, the best thing you can do, unless it's a tropical and needs the heat, is to go and take your recently um, save seeds and then go ahead and plant them right away instead of store them in a an envelope um, and then plant them out in the spring. Um, they do. I have a whole lot better germination success rate with them. So I thought of something else that I thought I wanted to share with you, but um, I'm really a Oaxacan green dent. Thank you. Um, that was a reminder. The corn that I have from Deanna, that's Oaxacan green dent corn. So thank you. Um, oh, so the thing that I want to mention about the screens, if you're going to look into making some, I can always lend mine out for a little bit of time. I also have, at least in the past, I haven't looked recently and everything's weird now, but at Collier's in their back room, they have different screens of different sizes. So you can make a frame um, and buy it by the square foot from them. And again, like different kind of go to thrift stores and find different strainers. With the bowls, you can get these baskets, but then also just big metal bowls work. Um, and I think to wind things up, just kind of talk about community seed saving and what we can do. So Pam mentioned SOS, Save Our Seeds, is something that Butte County Local Food Network is going with. Um, I um, I would also have to say that I don't know what the future of the seed library is going to be right now, but the seed swap is on. Just trying to figure out how to do it right. Um, it will be in a whole nother shape and form, whether it be online. I'm totally willing to take any suggestions, but I'm kind of thinking about people kind of post having a Facebook page and people post the varieties that they have and they package it themselves and then we figure out how to who gets to um, who gets to bid on them for free, but and then where to pick up. But that is something that's still going to happen. So please save seeds um, as if our dinner relied on it. Um, I think the maybe the last thing I did want to say about the squash, I can see my notes. So because there's a lot of variation there's basically 4 species of squash. There's the one that the butternuts are in, the machada. There's the pepo, which I mentioned before, zucchinis and pumpkins. And there's the one that the cushaw is in, which you're rarely going to see. And then there's the maxima, which is like the blue Hubbards and a lot of the really large types. Um, so you can, the pepo, out of all the winter squashes, the pepo is the most genetically different. If you were to save a butternut, then it's most likely going to taste like a butternut no matter what it looks like. If you're going to save something from the maxima, then it too will also likely have a really good flavor, just be some kind of weird shape and texture, or different, not weird, but a different than maybe the original one. And then cool, dry place is a great to store it. Cool, dry, dark place. And I think that's it, unless there's any other questions. So, um, so thank you for your interest, and I know that as as food may become more insecure, I know Pam's got a thing or two to say about that. It's good for us to rely on each other and for us to save seeds. One thing I have been telling Pam I was going to set up forever is to is I wanted to set up a page where some people would um, sign up and dedicate some of the yard space to grow seeds for the community. especially ones that are doing really well in the area. And I haven't done that yet, but we will still do that in the seed swap. And thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Well, it doesn't look like there's any more questions. So if you want to go to the bclocalfood.org, if you want to sign up and get some emails and hear more about all of the awesome things that they or we are doing, then thank you.
I just wanted to say a few more things before everyone goes. Just thank you
Great.
so much. If you can, yeah, I'm really amazed at the folks who showed up here. And if you have an interest in helping us work on different projects to save seeds, please contact us. We're at this point an all volunteer organization. And so a lot of really passionate folks, but we can always use new ideas and new blood and new folks that want to work with us. So please just join us. The one of the first steps is to get on our email list. The other is also to contact me at pam@bclocalfood.org. That's PAMM at bclocalfood.org. We have a community garden that's a demonstration food forest. We've done a couple of garden blitzes now and have installed 100 gardens in people's backyards. We'll be doing that again next year. We're starting a gleaning project, hope to be working with the city and also private property, need help with that. There are so many projects. We bring food up to CONCAL. We're working on a food policy council. So anywhere you want to plug in, and if you have ideas that we haven't thought of, just approach us. And if we're more than happy to support and put, to work with you to see your dreams come true. So thank you so much for being here and hope to see you again soon.
All right. Thank you all. And thanks for putting up with this weird technology. And and also the last thing, if you want to learn more, there is the Seed Garden. We got some books. Seed Garden. This one is a really good basic. She's from Sacramento, but Seed to Seed, Suzanne Ashworth. And then if you want to take it to the next level, Breed Your Own Vegetables by Carol Depp.
Thank you, everyone. Have fun. Bye.
David.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.